Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to this Office 365 Con Focus session sponsored by GSX. I'm your event moderator, Roger. All participant lines are muted, and we encourage you to use the questions panel to submit any questions or comments you have during today's presentation. We will be addressing questions at the end of the presentation. Our presenters for this session are Tim Book, Technical Sales Manager for GSX, and Olivier Renaud, Microsoft Specialist and Pre-Sales Manager at GSX. Tim has been with GSX Solutions for 6 years and has held various roles there. He is a former messaging administrator and has experience with multiple technologies and platforms, as well as pre-sales operations and customer support. Prior to his Technical Sales Manager role, Tim has led the GSX US support team and was also involved with product management. As a member of the GSX technical sales team and the product management team, Olivier Renaud has an in-depth PowerShell experience and a strong knowledge of Microsoft platforms, including Office 365, Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype for Business. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim to get us started. Tim?
Well, thanks, Roger. So like Roger mentioned, I'm Tim Book. I'm a technical sales manager here at GSX, and we'll talk about the agenda for today's presentation. What we're going to be going over here, we're going to be talking about Office 365 performance. Really the purpose of the session here is to empower yourself with more visibility and control over the cloud services that your users benefit from. So we're going to be talking about 365 performance, defining what good performance is. We're going to talk a little bit about baselining and how to achieve that as well. So all of the different tools and tricks that you can use to get some of your baseline metrics, and also talk about how to automate some of these performance checks and really store the information, analyze it for future use here. So Office 365 performance. What are we talking about here? Well, you've got two different experiences maybe that are going on. You've got what Microsoft is telling us. So Office 365 is a high-capacity, dedicated Microsoft network tool here. You shouldn't experience any performance issues connecting from your location, but if you do, it's best not to start with and wait on a support case. What they want you doing is checking out what's going on at your end-user location or at your client location, at your customer site, at your own site, whatever it may be. You should be investigating the problem from the inside out. What we're basically saying here is that we need to establish if there's an issue with the Office 365 infrastructure, the 365 tenant that you're on, or perhaps something that's locally with the client, with your network, DNS failures, some sort of issue that gets you, that is on the traffic on the route to the actual endpoint, the tenant inside of 365. And then what your end users might say. They're giving you some use cases, some experiences that they're having trying to connect to the 365 platform. You know, some generic type things. Switching from my inbox to my calendar used to be something I didn't notice, and now it's very, very slow. What's going on there? Why is it not working like it was before? I'm trying to upload files to SharePoint, and it takes forever. It's not working. It always slows down at a certain time. Or maybe some generic, the cloud is slow. Why did you guys move this stuff here? Everything used to work great. Now that we've been on the cloud, as everybody says, it was great, but we're experiencing lots of problems. So what we're trying to establish here is what the issues are, then how to find those issues, how to track those issues if they live inside of your environment or if they live outside in the external network or maybe even on the 365 side. So we will have some links to some of the underlying knowledge and documentation that we've been working on. So at the end of the presentation, we'll show some links about everything that we've been talking about here and how to find a lot of this, links to the tools, links to a lot of the white papers that Microsoft has published as well. So do you know how performance used to look when it was good? So you need metrics. You have to establish a baseline inside of your environment. Baselining helps answers performance questions. So some simple baselines that you may need to have, the time from your client computer to your egress point, the exit point from your network infrastructure, the time from the network infrastructure to Office 365, different locations around the world that are resolving those URLs, so different critical network locations you may have in your environment where your users are connecting from, where your customers are connecting from, basically those endpoints that are using that infrastructure. So what you want to do with a lot of this information is establish a baseline. The baseline is what normal performance is inside of the environment. You really can't know if you have an issue, either on a performance or an availability standpoint, if you don't have something to go on, if you don't have an established baseline. So it could be something where you have absolute numbers where you say it takes, 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds for us to perform this specific task or for us to hop from one network location to another. Is that good or bad? Well, you don't really know that until you establish these baselines. Every single customer that you would work with, every single endpoint that you deal with in your own network environment could be completely different from another one that you've experienced. So is 200 milliseconds for one specific test good for you? Maybe, maybe not, but that could be completely unacceptable for another location, you know, due to business requirements or just the way that things multiply with each other. If there's a little bit of latency in one hop, then it starts building up using different applications, and you start experiencing more network slowdowns and more issues trying to connect to the services that are being delivered. So you really do need that point of comparison, that reference to say, here's what the normal has been, the baseline has been for X amount of time. I have a customer or a user that's reporting an issue, a slowdown. We're going to show some tools to be able to how to figure out where that slowdown, where that potential slowdown is coming from, but you need something to establish that. So if you start troubleshooting with this and you say, well, it's taking X for us to be able to do that from that user's location, well, is X good or bad? That's the kind of stuff that you need to be able to find out here. So the baselining process itself, when do we want to start that? We really want to do that as early as possible, preferably during the proof of concept phase. You need to be able to establish what the normal is in the environment before any possible migrations, version upgrades, hardware migrations, basically any change in the environment. You want to know what it was before, implement your change after you do your testing, of course, because we all test, right? But after you do that, you want to be able to establish what it was before and then see if it's still performing within certain measurements, within certain deviations, if it's gotten much worse, if you've established a new baseline, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, what are the kinds of things that you want to be able to baseline? You want to identify which parameters you want to baseline inside the environment, the things that you're going to measure and report on. So things from the client location, what types of clients you're going to be measuring, the important network locations, different connection points, and the egress points. So basically the hops that we're going to be taking, because we're specifically today we're talking about networking, the hops that we're going to be taking along the path to Office 365, ultimately your tenant. And you need to have, you need to identify your Office 365 tenant information, so what data centers you're going to be going through, different measurements for that, and then the performance metrics that you actually want to identify. So connection times and mail routing times and number of hops, et cetera, et cetera. How do we gather that information? How do we establish this baselining information? There's a lot of manual ways to be able to do this through PowerShell, some Microsoft tools. We're going to be showing a lot of that today. And then there's an automatic ways to gather this information through some third-party tools that we're going to mention as well as some specific solutions that GSX would offer to be able to help with this. So the main point to take from all of this is to actually get that information, troubleshoot it during the migration process, react to it afterwards in case of performance problems, and then report on that information and actually use it later on. It's really one thing to be able to gather the information, troubleshoot it, migration finishes or a problem comes up and you fix it, everything's fine, and then we don't take a look at anything for 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is. We really want to be able to not only gather the info but store it, report on it, and have some sort of logic between it so we can monitor our performance throughout the entire process of the migration and during normal operations. That way we establish our baseline and know if there's any problems that are going on. So with that, I will turn it over to Olivier, who's actually going to talk about some of the tools that you can use to establish the baselining process, gather the information, and help troubleshoot any problems in your network as it relates to the network performance.
Thank you, Tim, for that introduction and explaining a little bit here the problematic. So as Tim mentioned, I will start with few very, very simple tools. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the ping, the trace route. So I'll show that in a minute. There's some occasions where that might be blocked because of ICMP protocol. So we'll see how you can overcome that. There's some PowerShell things that you can use that are very handy, and also some third-party tools that you can integrate with command line or just PowerShell. So let's take a look first at what's in PowerShell. So I mean, you can do that in straight command line window as well, but things like ping, Office 365 seems very, 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 very simple, but it does give you some kind of baseline. You can see the time, about 100 milliseconds here. I'm actually VPN'd into our headquarters in Europe, so I'm exiting there to our tenants in EMEA, as you can see here. So it does provide some information about what CAD server you're connecting inside Microsoft Office 365 Data Center. It provides some metrics here that you can gather as Tim explained the process. So that's good to do from where? So that's another parameter. So you can do that from a client, so a workstation, somebody that is experiencing issues, or just choose a specific machine to run all your baseline performance checks from, and what you should do on top is choose that egress point that Tim was referring to. So ideally, if you can connect to your proxy server and perform some tests from there or anything close, or at least do from the client to the proxy, so that you have a comparison of what's the impact of your internal network versus the external network. A good thing that will provide you some information is the traceroute information. So again, that's pretty straightforward. I'm sure all of you are pretty familiar with that. But it does give you a good baseline as well, giving you the different hubs, looking at the number of hubs that are in between you and Office 365. And here again, it's good to maintain that checks in your baseline, understand how many hubs are usually in between you and Office 365, and what's the latency, look if there are any specific hubs that are experiencing issues, whether you're connecting directly, doing breakout from your location, connecting to your headquarter, or also if you're using maybe express route and connecting directly to Office 365 with that. So simple information. Issue with these two is that sometimes the ICMP frames will be blocked. So you need something to test TCP directly. So let me end that trace route. And there's something quite nice that you can use. If you have Windows 8.1 or Windows Server 2012 R2, or later, you can use some features directly out of PowerShell. So we have test-net connection that will actually perform a ping and a TCP ping kind of on a port. So let's go towards outlook.office365.com. Then you can choose the port that you want to do. So that would be great as well to test, for example, 443, which you connect to using HTTPS. And you can see this is going to send the traps, do a few tests. I can see the ping, if it succeeded or not, the response time of that ping, and I can check that the TCP test succeeded, so that I was able to connect to that port. So if you don't have access to that, or you want to have more information on what was the connection time to that specific port, there are two free tools that you can use. One's called PS Tools, and what the other one is called Trace, TCP Trace. So again, as Tim mentioned, we'll highlight them at the end of the presentation, and we'll make sure that you get the slide deck sent out to you so you can look at all the references. So if I look at PS Tools, they have a PS ping that you can use, and basically same concept, outlook.office365.com. Here you need to put the port directly after, and so you can see that's a tool part of the sysinternals suite, and it will perform different pings directly using TCP. So here, what I like about that is that this will give you the actual time that it takes to connect using TCP and the kind of RTT to that. So a few tools that you can do. What's cool with that is that it's within PowerShell. You can kind of have some scripts so that you can just run the scripts and every now and then, and we'll see after if you want to do more automation how you can do with that. So first thing here. So now there are also some tools that you can use that are provided by Microsoft. So there are three tools I want to highlight today. First is the Microsoft Remote Connectivity Analyzer. It's cloud-based, so you can access that in the cloud. You can make different connectivity and configuration checks. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. So you can go at testconnectivity.microsoft.com and perform different checks. So that's good, but it's more to check the status of your tenant, or not even your tenant, and see what it is from a remote location, okay? But it won't provide you with information from that specific site that you might be troubleshooting. So what I want to focus on today will be the two other tools, the Office 365 Client Performance Analyzer, or also called the OCPA, and the new Support and Recovery Assistant. So let's take a look at the OCPA. So you can run that for Exchange or SharePoint and just hit run. It will ask you for your credentials, and then we'll perform the test. It takes some time, so I have some results I can show you from last week. So if we take a look at the Exchange test, we'll do a few things. So first, it will be some basic client machine tests, things like what's the OS, what's the RAM, CPU's location. Then you will have some information about your ISP, and then it will do the different port connectivity checks. So check TCP on port 80, 443, 587 for secure SMTP, POP IMAP if you use that. And then comes the most interesting part to me is the different performance metrics. What's pretty cool is that it gives you some kind of best practice threshold, so you can kind of understand if you're under good performance towards the standards or not. Keep in mind it will always change. It's really dependent to your configuration, your architecture, where you are, where's your tenant, all of this information. But so things like DNS resolution time, a very good thing to look at. Network hops to Office 365. So basically that's what we saw earlier with the traceroute. You can see packet loss, you can see connectivity with ICMP, then you can see the TCP ping as well. So a lot of different information that's really useful. You can show the traceroute details. So the idea is that you can use that in different ways to do your baselining process. I would suggest this is a cool thing. You can take screenshots, you can save that, you can put all the metrics if you want to. You can actually download all the results in an Excel file, so you could store that Excel file and can establish your performance baselining with that, or you can just write down the metrics on your own. So really useful, definitely recommend that. The other way you can use that is to actually troubleshoot issues. So if you have a specific end user complaining, or you have a remote office that is complaining about their connectivity, well, you can run that tool and make sure that everything is performing as expected. But again, as Tim explained, if you don't do that before you experience issues, then you won't have a baseline to compare that to. So you need to do that as early as possible, so that when people complain, when you hear some bad feedback about connectivity, about performance, then you have something to compare to. You need to know what's good performance to understand if it's bad. Okay, so great tool. We have all the links that we'll provide you with. You can also download that directly from the RCA website. Other tool I wanted to highlight today is the Support and Recovery Assistant. So that's something you could actually provide to end users, because it's really user-friendly and it asks you this question. It's trying to help you out. So for example, if you are experiencing some Outlook issues, let's do that. I have some issues. Yeah, it keeps asking my password. I don't know why. I put my right password in, so I do next. Is this the affected machine? Yes, it is indeed. And then we'll do all the connectivity checks from here. So we'll make sure that you can actually connect, check your tenant, make sure that the client is configured correctly, and it will provide you some tips on that. So it takes a few seconds to run, so we'll skip that, but really, really interesting tool as well. So Microsoft is really trying to provide you some tools that you can use kind of ad hoc to provide these tests. So these different tools, they can be great because they will provide you metrics on the connectivity, on the performance that can ease your troubleshooting when end users are complaining, to look at whether it's your tenants, your network performance, the client configuration. So it's great, especially the OCPA. I definitely recommend you to try it out to troubleshoot any kind of performance issues when you deploy that. And as we stressed out today with Tim, I think it's really important that you start considering building some baselines in your environment, ideally for each of your location, each of your offices, but at least for some of them or for your main headquarters, just to know what's good performance, right? So the only limitation of doing what we've shown you today is that it's going to be quite difficult to automate. You'll need to probably write a few scripts, probably try to have some kind of process that you follow, and you will need to spend some time on that. It's also not very scalable to a lot of multiple sites, remote sites, because you will need to do that manually or to deploy all your scripts to gather all the information in some files. So it's not very easy. The other thing is that, as you've seen, there's no really out-of-the-box formatting. So you will need to put something nicely in an Excel spreadsheet and then do some graphs on that. So it can be very time-consuming. But still, we definitely recommend that you do some of these tests to have some kind of baseline. If you don't want to spend the time and automate all that, well, you need to have a tool that will be easier, better, that will be able to automate all these tests and deploy some probes. So that's how, with GSX, would like to help you out. So I'll let Tim do a quick introduction of GSX, just to show you what we do and what tools we have that can help you out in troubleshooting and managing your Office 365 and doing all the reporting to make sure you have visibility over that.
Thanks, Olivier. So like Olivier mentioned, we do have a lot of tools that can help with this performance monitoring, with this baselining here. And I'll just talk a little bit about the company and then talk briefly about the kinds of offerings that we have for this and answer any questions at the end of the session as mentioned earlier. So a little bit about GSX Solutions. We were founded in 1996, so this is our 20th anniversary. We have headquarters in Switzerland. We have offices here in the U.S. in Boston and UK and France, Switzerland, China, more than 600 customers in 40 different countries. We do specialize in Office 365 solutions for large enterprise, but we do have customers ranging all the way down from small 5 and 10 user tenants all the way up to, like I said, these large enterprises that are slowly migrating to the cloud. And then some of our solutions for Office 365. So here we've got all the different platforms, all the different technologies inside of 365 and what we offer as far as performance monitoring and reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So within 365, you've obviously got all the different suites in here, so Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Skype for Business, and Office 365, the management of it itself. So here you can see all the different services, all the different offerings that we have. Lots of information and lots of abilities and tools for Exchange Online. We have performance monitoring tools with our GSX Monitor and Analyzer product, performance reporting, usage reporting, and mass management with our enterprise management and our 365 usage. And then for most of the platforms as well, we do also offer services around those to assist with the performance monitoring of your migration process, with your onboarding for new tenants, monitoring your on-prem environment as well. I know we're talking about 365 here, but that during the migration process, and a lot of people are going to be stuck inside of a hybrid model for quite a while, if not permanently, we do offer some information and some services around those as well. So SharePoint Online usage reporting and services, OneDrive usage reporting, Skype for Business usage reporting and monitoring, and then also the 365 management itself with a lot of our tools being able to get security and compliance reporting and then some services around those. So lots of good information inside of here, lots of different products that we can show here. And then for the monitoring performance for all applications, what we're really talking about here is to be able to monitor the entire experience for your end users. Let's think of the services that we're providing from an IT perspective as services rather than servers or a specific application. We're providing an experience, we're providing a service to our end customers, to our users. So it's one thing to say that we have the 365 experience is okay. But what does that mean for the 365 experience? There's the availability of it, all the different network check-in that we had just gone through earlier, the individual service status and the portal information we get about outages. But what encompasses that experience a user has using your email services 365? Well, there's security examples, so there's possibly iron ports that are involved inside of their iron port devices. We provide health, performance, and usage monitoring for those as well as some troubleshooting. There's load balancers, helping to pass that network traffic and balance it to make that experience good for your customers. Monitoring with temp devices and other ones as well. There's the MDM portion of it, so people are accessing these services, these resources through their mobile phones, through ActiveSync protocols, for example, through BlackBerry servers, through Traveler servers, whatever it is, being able to simulate that experience and monitor the performance and availability of that is something that's critical to the end user experience. And then network and proxy servers as well, so the performance of those different services, DNS services and file servers and other Windows services. So all of these different technologies, all the different applications and server types play into the experience that your end users are going to have. So you really want to have the overall picture of that environment and being able to simulate that activity from different locations to monitor it, to report on usage of those appliances and those applications is very, very critical to make sure that we have what we're looking ultimately for is a good end user high satisfaction experience. And then to be able to pull all of that information from all of our different monitoring tools and offerings into a centralized dashboard for baselining. So using the GSX Analyzer portion of the tool, you can create different trend reports and track your SLAs, do a lot of forecasting and capacity planning for your environment. All of the information from our monitoring suite would feed into the Analyzer reporting dashboard, and here you can do your baselining for the past 6 months. What is the performance of, let's say, for example, the ActiveSync protocol, simulating that experience to Office 365? What's it been over the past 6 months? What's it been from the Boston office versus the Shanghai office versus the Reykjavik office, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to gather that information, store it, report on it, and then on top of that, there's a people process as well. Using the information, going in there, making it a habit to go in and look at the information, not just when there's a problem, but to review the information periodically, create reports that have trending and capacity planning reports to see if you have any issues that might be coming up down the road. Okay, all very, very critical. As administrators, we're usually very good about responding to issues. Somebody gets a page, somebody calls the help desk, says there's an issue, we fix it, that's great. But having this reporting, this baselining process is really going to hopefully allow you to prevent issues before your end users, before your help desk, before the CEO reports these issues and starts knocking down your door. Okay, so that's just a little quick offering, a discussion about the offering for GSX here. Here you can see in the presentation, it's going to be available for download later, all the different links to some of the things that we had talked about throughout the presentation. So some of the white papers about baselining and performance tuning from Microsoft, links to the connectivity tools, the OCPA, the recovery tool, links to the third-party tools here, and then we've got some GSX solutions links as well, so some of the offerings that we have on our website at gsx.com. So now we'll open it up for a little bit of questions. So I'll turn that over to Roger, and we'll see if anybody has anything to ask of us.
Well, thank you, Tim and Olivia. And we do have some questions that I'll jump right into. I'm just going to throw these out and have either or both of you respond. First one, not surprisingly, is regarding hybrids. Do all of these techniques work in a hybrid deployment?
Thanks, Roger. So I'll take that question. So good question. So what I've shown is really applicable to any kind of service. So and same for the baselining. So what we've seen is that often this is more something that admins are used to do on-premise. You can definitely use these techniques that we've showed you. So using the different network checks will definitely work on-premise. Things like the OCPA were really designed to access your tenant, so that will not be applicable. But you can use the remote connectivity analyzer. So if you search for that online or go through the links we've provided, this is for on-premise or specific tabs for Exchange, or you can go to the Office 365 tab. And the last tool that we've showed, the Support and Recovery Assistant, that's only for Office 365.
Well, great. Next question then is, can you run the OCPA from a remote location?
So the OCPA, so yes and no. Basically, you cannot do that remotely, so you will need to physically deploy the OCPA where you want to run the tests from. So if you want to make some tests from an end user workstation or in another office in New York, Los Angeles, you need to physically deploy that tool, run it there, and then extract the results. So you can do, but you need to physically connect to the machine.
Very good. And we have time for, I think, just one more question. what specific services does GSX provide around a Office 365 migration?
So we'll definitely help out, as Tim outlined today. So we're very good at monitoring both the on-premise environment, the Office 365 environment, and any kind of hybrid deployment. So as early as you know about your migration and you're going to do a POC, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll definitely be helping out for monitoring the POC environment as early as possible and trying to compare that with your on-premise experience or whatever service you were using previously. Establish these baseline, look at the different performance information, but not only will look at the performance information, but also about what you've been using on premise. So we usually do what we call the migration assessment, where we're going to assess the current environment, look at what's used, what's not used, help out for the migration, make sure that you're ready to go to Office 365. There's a few things that you need to check, especially depending what you use on Office 365. We've seen deployments before where customers move to Office 365, messaging works fine, but then if you're using a lot of capabilities from Skype for Business Online, things can be quite challenging there. So yes, definitely we provide some services. Please contact us if you are migrating, you'd like some more information, you want us to show you a quick run through of the tool, or just have any question towards your projects. We'll be definitely glad to help out.
Well, I want to thank you, Olivier and Tim, for a great presentation regarding performance analysis and troubleshooting, and which I'm sure is top of mind with a lot of people out in our audience today. And of course, we want to thank GSX for helping make it possible for us to bring everyone today's focus session. And that will conclude this session, and you may now disconnect. Thanks all.